in that direction is an area of very high levels of contamination known as the Red Forest. And drone videos now come out, which officials here have seen, and they've confirmed to us that Russian soldiers not only built trenches there, but they appear to have stayed there as well.
On April 26, 1986, a devastating disaster occurred in Chernobyl, Ukraine. The explosion of Reactor Number 4 at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant resulted in a catastrophic nuclear accident, shocking the world and leaving a lasting impact on both the environment and the lives of people. Nearly 4 decades later, scientists made a remarkable discovery in the Chernobyl forest. They encountered phenomena so strange that they challenged historical understanding, from mysterious creatures to deadly plants. Let's reveal the top 20 most remarkable findings unearthed by scientists in the Chernobyl forest. Number 20. The Blackbird of Chernobyl. This tale might ring a bell if you've heard of the Moth Man from West Virginia. The Blackbird of Chernobyl's tale might remind you of that strange story. Before the big disaster on April 26, 1986, some workers at the Chernobyl plant claimed they saw a strange, large creature. This creature was described as a big black figure with glowing red eyes and huge wings. It's said that this scary being somehow knew something bad was going to happen to the reactor. Just like the Moth Man, who showed up before a bridge fell in Point Pleasant, the Blackbird of Chernobyl seemed to bring bad luck. People who saw it said they had bad dreams and got weird phone calls. Even after the disaster, workers cleaning up the Chernobyl site said they saw this creature flying over the broken city. Interestingly, just like the Moth Man, the Blackbird disappeared after the big accident, never to be seen again. Some people think it was just a mix-up. Maybe they mistook it for a black stork, a big bird from southern Eurasia. These storks can be almost 3 feet tall, with a wingspan of nearly 6 feet, so it's easy to see how someone might think they saw something scarier. However, no one knows whether the Blackbird was real or just a story. Even now, there's no solid proof that the Blackbird existed. Number 19. The radiation-eating black fungi. After the tragedy at Chernobyl, many thought that life would disappear from the area. Yet, nature found a way to bring new life near the radioactive reactor. This life can thrive in a dangerous environment. On February 24, 2022, Russian troops went into the Chernobyl exclusion zone in northern Ukraine to clean up. That's when they found something strange: black fungi that can survive in highly radioactive places. This discovery could be a big deal for protecting people from radiation, especially in space. Even though scientists only started studying these fungi recently, they first found traces of them in the early 1990s. Researchers were interested in these fungi because they have a lot of melanin. This pigment is usually in skin and hair and helps these fungi survive. It turns out that besides surviving gamma radiation, these fungi can also turn it into energy, like plants do with sunlight in photosynthesis. This special ability has scientists excited. They're researching how these fungi could be used outside of Chernobyl. For instance, in 2016, SpaceX and NASA sent some of these fungi to the International Space Station, ISS, to see if they could protect astronauts from cosmic radiation. The study on the ISS showed that a thin layer of this fungus could block some radiation. This could be a big step for protecting astronauts during deep space missions. So, these black fungi are not just surviving in a radioactive wasteland. They might help us explore space safely one day. Number 18. The Red Forest. In the heart of the Chernobyl exclusion zone lies a forest that tells a tale of tragedy and transformation. This forest, known as the Red Forest, went through a drastic change after the nuclear accident in 1986. The pine trees in this forest absorbed dangerous amounts of radiation, causing them to perish and take on a strange ginger color. The effects of radiation didn't stop at just changing the color of the trees. Scientists observed that decomposition in the Red Forest was different from normal forests. Leaves and tree trunks decayed much slower, which means they took longer to break down. This happened because the radiation slowed down the work of tiny organisms like microbes and fungi that usually help break down dead plants. The strange appearance of the red forest, with its crimson hue and otherworldly vibe, has captured the imaginations of many. It has inspired video games, books, and movies that explore what the world might look like after a big disaster. Scientists predict that the pine trees in the red forest will keep their red color for years to come. This serves as a reminder of the devastating event that occurred there. But it also shows how nature can adapt and survive even in harsh conditions. Number 17. The babushkas of Chernobyl. In Poland and Russia, the word babushka means grandmother. The babushkas of Chernobyl are exactly that. Elderly women who decided to stay in their homes despite a big disaster. After the Chernobyl accident, about 100 of these women moved back to their homes in the area. They loved their land and homes so much that they couldn't bear to leave, even though it was dangerous because of the radiation. At first, the authorities said they couldn't go back, but the babushkas didn't give up. They kept asking, and eventually, the authorities allowed them to return, even though they thought the women wouldn't live long in such a risky place. Many years later, in the early 2010s, some people interviewed these women. Most of them were already in their 70s and 80s. It was a mystery how they managed to stay alive and not get sick from the radiation. Maybe they were affected, but they didn't show it. They were strong and determined to stay in their homeland. The babushkas believed that it's hunger that can end lives, not radiation. They were already old when they decided to go back, and it's been over 8 years since then. When they pass away, Chernobyl might not have any residents left. But until then, the babushkas will be remembered and respected for their bravery and love for their homes. Number 16. The altered genes in dogs. After the Chernobyl disaster, not only did the babushkas stay, but many dogs did too. When the nuclear reactor melted down in 1986, people were told to leave, and their pets were supposed to be brought with them to avoid the radiation. But some dogs escaped and stayed in Chernobyl. With the help of cleanup workers, these dogs survived. Now, there are over 800 descendants of these original dogs living in the area around the nuclear plant. It's a mystery how they survived, but scientists found something interesting about them. When scientists looked at their genes, they found that these Chernobyl dogs are different from other dog populations. They might look like regular dogs, but their genes have changed somehow. It's not clear if this change is because of the radiation or because they've been isolated for so long, leading to dogs mating with close relatives. Most of these dogs are related to German shepherds, but besides that, we don't know much about them. What we do know is that they are evolving quickly. Visitors are warned not to play with these dogs to stay safe from radiation. These Chernobyl dogs are a reminder of how animals can adapt to survive in harsh environments. They've made Chernobyl their home, and their story is a fascinating one. Number 15. Deformed farm animals. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster didn't just affect dogs and wildlife. Farm animals were also impacted. In the years after the 1986 disaster, many deformed farm animals were born in the area. In 1990 alone, around 400 deformed animals were reported. These animals had various abnormalities, such as malformed heads and extra limbs. The radiation from the disaster damaged their DNA, which is like a blueprint for our bodies. When DNA is damaged, it can lead to mistakes in how our bodies grow and develop. For example, some animals might grow abnormally, leading to deformed limbs or other body parts. If the radiation affected the DNA in reproductive cells, these mutations could be passed down to their babies, causing congenital deformities from birth. It's not just farm animals. Wildlife in the exclusion zone, like horses, wolves, and birds, have also adapted to the radioactive environment. However, they may have fewer babies, and some of their babies may be mutated. Some animal populations have even grown despite the radiation, but not all animals do well in this environment. Invertebrates, like bees and butterflies, have decreased in numbers, likely because they lay eggs in radioactive soil. Aquatic life in lakes within the zone, including frogs and fish, also faces genetic problems from radioactive materials settling in the sediment. Scientists are keeping a close eye on these animals to see how they are affected by the radiation. They want to understand how different species cope with living in such a challenging environment. Number 14. A massive sarcophagus. Did you know that there's a big structure in Chernobyl called a sarcophagus? It's not like the ancient Egyptian sarcophagi that were used for burying the dead. This sarcophagus was built to contain radioactivity. When the Chernobyl disaster happened, one of the biggest challenges was to keep the radioactive material inside the damaged reactor. To solve this problem, they built the sarcophagus, also known as the Mammoth Beam. It was constructed from May to November 1986, and it's one of the largest movable structures ever made by humans. The construction of the sarcophagus was done under extremely dangerous conditions with high levels of radiation. Workers had to work quickly to get it done. It's made of over 400,000 cubic meters of concrete and 7,300 tons of metal framework. Despite being built in a hurry, the sarcophagus is very complex. It has over 60 holes for observing and ventilating. Even though the sarcophagus was a temporary fix, it started to deteriorate over time. This meant that there was a risk of radioactive material leaking out. In 1988, experts predicted that the sarcophagus would need repairs within 20 to 30 years. True enough, water started leaking through its roof, becoming radioactive. This was a serious problem. So in 2016, they took down the old sarcophagus and cleaned up the area. Then, they put up a new and safer structure called the New Safe Confinement. This project faced many challenges, like not having enough money and facing delays. But they managed to finish it. This new structure helps reduce the radioactivity in Chernobyl, making it safer for everyone. Number 13. The hundreds of gas masks. In the town of Pripyat, there's a place called Middle School Number 3 that's become quite famous. You might have seen pictures of it on the internet. Inside this abandoned school, there's a room where gas masks are scattered all over the floor. It's a haunting sight, especially when you know the history of Chernobyl. These gas masks weren't used during the nuclear disaster. They were stored in the school during the Cold War era. Back then, people were worried about nuclear, biological, and chemical attacks. The masks were made to protect children in case of such attacks. Most of the masks are small and meant for kids, which is a sad reminder of the young students who used to walk the school halls. Sadly, looters have taken some of the masks to get the tiny bits of silver from the filters inside. This has disturbed the masks, creating a scene that looks like something from a scary movie. The school itself used to be full of life, with children laughing and learning. Now, it stands empty and silent, a remembrance of the disaster that changed everything. Number 12. The Stalkers of Chernobyl. Most of us have a dream list of places we'd love to visit, like Japan, New Zealand, or Australia, where famous landmarks and attractions draw crowds. But did you know that there's a small group of people who are drawn to places that are abandoned or have a dark history? They're called dark tourists. Dark tourism is when people travel to places associated with death, suffering, or tragedy. These can be places like battlefields, disaster zones, or sites of notorious crimes. One such place that attracts dark tourists is Chernobyl, the site of a devastating nuclear disaster. Despite the danger of radiation in the area, some people call themselves stalkers who roam around Chernobyl. Stalkerism is a term used to describe this activity, which can be seen as a mix of adventure and exploration. However, it's important to note that these stalkers often engage in activities that are on the edge of being legal or illegal. You might wonder why anyone would want to visit such a potentially dangerous place. Well, for some, it's simply a matter of curiosity and interest. But for many dark tourists, there's a morbid fascination with these places. They want to learn about the events that took place there and immerse themselves in the history. Would you be interested in visiting Chernobyl if you had the chance? You may give it a try, but you should also be mindful of the risks involved. Something is intriguing about the mysterious and strange atmosphere of such places. However, it's crucial to remember to show respect for these sites. They hold important historical significance and are reminders of tragic events that should be treated with reverence. Number 11. The color-changing frogs. In Chernobyl, researchers have been fascinated by the frogs in the area, especially the eastern tree frogs. These frogs are usually bright green, but in Chernobyl, they have particularly adapted to their radioactive environment by changing color. This might seem like a small change, but it's quite significant. Around 2016, researchers noticed that the frogs in Chernobyl were not just a little darker, some were completely black, which is a stark contrast to their original vibrant green color. This color change is due to the same reason I told you about earlier with the black radiation-eating fungi. These frogs produce more melanin, which is the pigment that determines human skin color. Having more melanin is not just about having a darker color, it also offers protection against the harmful effects of radiation. Melanin has the incredible ability to absorb and dissipate radiation energy, which reduces the chances of cell damage. This means that frogs with more melanin, resulting in darker skin, were better able to survive in the radiation-rich environment of Chernobyl. What's even more interesting is that the dark coloration of these frogs is linked to the historic radiation levels in the area, not the current levels. This suggests that the frogs with darker coloration at the time of the Chernobyl accident, who were initially in the minority, had a survival advantage because of the protective action of melanin. Over the more than 10 generations since the accident, natural selection has favored these darker frogs, making them the dominant type in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. This adaptation of the frogs in Chernobyl shows us how living things can change to survive in challenging environments. It's a great example of evolution happening right before our eyes. Number 10. The atomic vodka. After the terrible event in 1986, the Chernobyl exclusion zone was set up. This area was hit the hardest by the disaster. Scientists say it will be unsafe for a staggering 24,000 years. However, in this seeming space, a group of scientists led by Jim Smith, an environmental scientist at the University of Portsmouth, came up with a unique project. They decided to create something using raw materials from around Chernobyl. Their idea was to make vodka called Atomic using water and cereal from the area. This drink is the first and probably the only consumer product to come out of the Chernobyl exclusion zone since the nuclear disaster. Their research focused on an experimental farming plot near the Opachichi settlement, which is in the less contaminated parts of the exclusion zone. They grew rye on this plot, and while it did show some radioactivity, simply distilling the rye into vodka removed the radioactivity. The distillation process left many heavier elements in the waste, resulting in a spirit where the only detectable radioactivity was natural carbon-14, similar to what you would find in any spirit. In simpler terms, the distillation process made the vodka safe to drink. The atomic vodka was then diluted using mineral water from a deep aquifer in Chernobyl, located about 6 miles south of the reactor. Despite its location, the water seemed to be free from Chernobyl-related radioactivity. However, there are still some doubts about its safety. Even though scientists created it, it's understandable to be cautious. I wouldn't want to drink anything potentially radioactive, would you? I probably won't try this vodka, but it's interesting to think about how this product could help Chernobyl economically. The Chernobyl disaster had a devastating impact on the area, and finding ways to revitalize it could be important for the future. Number 9. The firefighters of Chernobyl. On the night of the tragedy, the firefighters of Chernobyl were the first to respond to the scene. Vladimir Pravik, a Soviet firefighter, and his 14-man shift quickly mobilized to the site. Pravik's team initially struggled to identify the fire source due to the extensive damage and multiple fires. Eventually, they focused on the turbine hall's roof, considering it the most immediate threat due to its contents of flammable materials. However, the flames should have been the least of their worries. The exposure to extreme levels of radioactivity soon began to take its toll on the firefighters. They started experiencing early symptoms of acute radiation syndrome, ARS, which may include fever, nausea, loss of consciousness, and seizures. Despite the grave danger, Pravik and his men persisted in their efforts until they were physically unable to continue. Following their exposure, Pravik was hospitalized. He endured severe symptoms of ARS, and his condition deteriorated rapidly. This demonstrates the harsh reality of radiation's impact on the human body. There are rumors that Pravik received lethal doses of radiation, to the point that his eyes turned from dark brown to blue. Unfortunately, Pravik is just one of the many people who suffered from the disaster. Many of the people who fled from Chernobyl suffered from the effects of radioactivity until the end of their lives. It's important to remember the bravery and sacrifice of people like Pravik and his team who risked their lives to contain the disaster. Their actions helped prevent an even greater catastrophe, despite the personal cost they endured. The firefighters of Chernobyl faced a situation unlike any other. They were confronted with a disaster of unimaginable scale and danger. Yet, they did not hesitate to respond, showing incredible courage and dedication to their duty. Number 8. The toxic elephant's foot. The elephant's foot is not what you might imagine. It's not a part of an actual elephant, but rather a mass of radioactive material located in a basement beneath Reactor Number 4 at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. This mass, mainly composed of silicon dioxide with traces of uranium, titanium, zirconium, magnesium, and graphite, was formed during the nuclear disaster. Its name comes from its resemblance to the foot of an elephant. Initially, the radioactivity near the elephant's foot was so high that it could deliver a lethal radiation dose within minutes. It was so dense and dangerous that armor-piercing bullets had to be used to chip off samples for analysis. Despite its dangers, there is often fascination surrounding this material because corium, the lava-like fuel-containing material, has only formed naturally 5 times in history. The first was in 1979 during the 3 Mile Island accident in Pennsylvania, then in 1986 in Chernobyl, and 3 times in 2011 at the Fukushima Daiichi plant disaster in Japan. The elephant's foot weighs about 2.2 tons, 2 metric tons, and has already hardened. However, it remains extremely dangerous and will remain lethal and hazardous for decades, if not centuries to come. This is because corium is something unknown. Scientists still have no idea how it will behave in the long run. While a new confinement system has been placed over Chernobyl to contain its harmful effects, scientists are researching ways to properly mitigate, quench, and cool corium. Number 7. Dolls of Chernobyl. Among the remains of Chernobyl are dolls. These figures, mostly destroyed and broken, are scattered across the town, many in the local kindergarten. While they might seem like leftovers from the hasty evacuation, they have become a subject of intrigue and debate. The Chernobyl disaster completely changed life in Pripyat, a city once seen as the future of the Soviet Union. The explosion at the nuclear power plant led to an emergency evacuation, exposing residents to significant levels of radiation. Despite the initial measures, the average whole-body dose to the evacuees was estimated at around 2 rem, potentially increasing the lifetime risk of cancer for those affected. To this day, this lethal level of radioactivity remains. Contrary to popular belief, these dolls were not left behind by children who fled on the day of the disaster. Instead, most of them were placed by people who visit the exclusion zone. Despite the radioactivity in the area, many of these dolls were put in Chernobyl as an attraction, while some were placed as a tribute to those who lost their homes. They also serve as a remembrance for the children who abruptly lost their homes, and, subsequently, their childhoods because of the tragedy. However, this act has sparked controversy as it blurs the line between the authentic historical narrative of the tragedy and the constructed narratives by visitors. As tourism in the area has increased, so has the interaction with these objects, leading to concerns about the preservation of the site and the respect owed to its tragic history. Number 6. The Abandoned Carnival. The abandoned carnival in Pripyat, set to open on May 1, 1986, became a symbol of the nuclear accident that occurred just days before. Today, only the rusting Ferris wheel and unused bumper cars remain. Pripyat was a thriving city, showcasing the Soviet Union's atomic age, with 50,000 residents, including nuclear plant workers. The disaster released huge radiation amounts, causing confusion and delayed responses. The park, if opened, would have been enjoyed by many. Some say the park briefly opened on April 27th to distract from the disaster, but it's unclear. The site now stands as a haunting reminder, with nature reclaiming it, trees growing through cracks, and weeds covering the once bustling grounds. The park, designed for joy, now sits abandoned and forgotten, a stark contrast to its intended purpose. Number 5. Silhouettes of Missing People. In Chernobyl, some visitors, known as dark tourists, created strange artworks using shadow graffiti. The city is now uninhabited, but if you explore, you'll discover what many call shadows of missing people. These are silhouettes of people painted in black on the desolate buildings of Chernobyl. Finding these artworks is like a game, as some are very small and hard to find. These silhouettes are often depicted as if they are real people frozen in time, stuck in their actions. For instance, you might see a shadow of a child about to press a light switch, or a shadow of an infant playing hide-and-seek. Some show children playing together, while others depict a lone child crying. It's almost as if these shadows are the only inhabitants of this desolate and radioactive area. These artworks serve as a reminder of the people who once lived in Chernobyl, capturing moments of daily life that were abruptly halted by the disaster. They also add a haunting and mysterious atmosphere to the abandoned city, drawing in visitors who are intrigued by its history and the stories of those who lived there. Each shadow tells a story, sparking the imagination of those who see them. They are a unique form of art that blends with the strange surroundings of Chernobyl, creating a surreal experience for those who explore the area. Number 4. The Hospital of Death. In Pripyat, an abandoned middle school isn't the only strange place. There's also the hospital, known as MC4-126. Located on Dubai Naroda Street, this hospital was originally built to care for Pripyat's residents, including the workers of the nearby nuclear power plant and their families. On the morning of April 26, 1986, the hospital started receiving casualties even before any official announcement of the accident had been made. If the walls of this hospital could talk, they would probably tell horrifying stories of the chaos and fear during the evacuation. Even today, you can still see clothes left behind that were too contaminated to be moved when the patients were flown to Moscow for treatment of their radiation injuries. Most of the hospital has been left behind and forgotten. Many of its rooms have been vandalized by dark tourists. Despite this, the hospital remains one of the most chilling and horrifying sights in Pripyat, serving as a dark reminder of the harrowing experiences residents faced in the hours after the nuclear meltdown. Exploring the hospital, you might feel a sense of sadness and eeriness, imagining the fear and confusion that once filled its halls. The abandoned clothes and medical equipment left behind tell a silent but powerful story of the tragedy that unfolded here. Number 3. Abandoned Cooling Tower. One of the most well-known spots in Chernobyl is the abandoned cooling towers. Getting to these towers feels like an adventure across a huge area of concrete filled with things like old objects and bits of buildings left over from construction. Inside the bigger tower, the way sounds echo can make it feel strange, like something out of a dream. You can hear even the smallest noise bouncing off the floor. The towers are full of parts of the cooling system and other things that were never used. Now they just sit there, silent and empty, intriguing those who like dark tourism and the explorers who check out what's left of Chernobyl. Number 2. The giant catfish. Surprisingly, catfish have thrived in Chernobyl's cooling pond, defying expectations. These Wells catfish, also known as Silurus glanus, have grown to huge sizes, some nearly 6 feet long. Despite the high radiation levels in the area, these catfish have adapted and are thriving. The pond lacks predators but has plenty of prey, creating an ideal environment for these catfish to grow. While their size is impressive, it's not unusual for this species, which can grow up to 16 feet long and live for about 100 years. The success of these catfish has led experts to wonder what other life might be thriving in Chernobyl, despite the initial fears that the polluted waters would become inhospitable to aquatic life. Number 1. Graveyard of vehicles. In Chernobyl, besides abandoned homes and dogs, there's a graveyard of vehicles reclaimed by nature. Left behind after the disaster, these vehicles, including buses, cars, and helicopters, were abandoned near Rosoka village, worth over $48 million altogether. Some were dismantled for scrap, but remnants remain. In Pripyat, housing armored vehicles and trucks with huge tanks used to wash down radioactive dust now sit idle. Despite efforts to reclaim them, nature slowly takes over. While radioactivity might not immediately harm, long-term effects prompt swift evacuation. Although delayed, evacuation started 36 hours after the meltdown. Which of these 20 scientists' discoveries in the Chernobyl forest did you find both intriguing and astonishing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe for more captivating videos.